past, and a lot of the wrestling fans are, they're kind of just like, well, whatever. They don't really care one way or the other because, Brock Lesnar kind of came in, became the youngest world champion of all time, beat the fuck out of everybody.
Like he did in the WWE, youngest world champion. He's that.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The wrestling fans don't really care if he leaves because they already saw him beat everybody. I mean, it became not interesting because he was so good. He was just beating everybody. He didn't even have a gimmick. He had no mic skills. He was like one of the few guys in the last few years that even had a manager. Like a mouthpiece manager, Paulie, and they didn't care about it.
Being a wrestler in MMA is not it's not foreign. Whether it's Hank Abbott or Steve Blackman or Ken Shamrock, no one has dominated the way Brock Lesnar did both worlds.
Right. Well, no one dominated the way he did, but that's what I don't understand about the MMA fans, and I'm one of them. I love it. I've been watching. Obviously, I couldn't even believe what I was seeing when I saw the very first UFC because I watched it on pay-per-view. We had a party, got together, and the only way I even knew about the first UFC pay-per-view was through Pro Wrestling magazine. And in the very first UFC, there's a pro wrestler, Ken Shamrock, is in it. And he does great. He taps out to Gracie. No shame in that. I mean,
one of the best fighters of all time.
Yeah, one of the best fighters of all time. And then he goes back and draws him later. But it's a pro wrestler on the first UFC card, and people don't even understand the history of MMA when it comes to the fact that MMA came from pro wrestling. The opening of our show,
blending of every fight. Back then every fighter didn't have to be as well. They didn't have to be as well versed in every style. You had pro wrestlers going against boxers versus jiu-jitsu guys and judo guys and karate, and it was mixed martial arts. It was coming from all styles.
That's what I was getting at was that the father of mixed martial arts, which became UFC, became Strikeforce, Dream, all this shit, is Antonio Inoki. Antonio Inoki fought Muhammad Ali. He didn't do so good against Muhammad Ali, but he fought him.
And how did Chuck Webner do against Andre the Giant, though?
Right, exactly. But it was in the same spirit. But Antonio Inoki would bring in all the karate guys and bring all the Muay Thai guys in from Thailand. He'd bring in fighters from all over the world to come and fight him on those events. And it was that's where MMA came from. MMA came from pro wrestling, and all these dipshit nerds on the message boards that you see, it's just disastrous. These people that get on these fucking MMA message boards and talk shit on pro wrestling, or people that don't even understand. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of cheesy fucking bullshit angles, and especially since the mid to late 80s, there's been a lot of really cheesy fucking acting and shit in pro wrestling to build their matches. But
that's one of my complaints with pro wrestling is they're not actors, they're fighters. Let them do what they do best. Of course, you want it to be entertaining. It's a different thing. It's not boxing. It's not it's not sanctioned fight so much like that. You're there to draw money. That's the name of the game. But UFC knows that too. Otherwise, they would have their top guys fighting their top guys, not guys coming in with the most heat to go against their champ. Guys that have only had a few matches.
Yeah, well, that's what's going on in MMA now. But in pro wrestling, the thing about pro wrestling though is a lot of their guys get protected all the time, which is because they have to protect their characters, because that's what they do. They build a guy into a character, and MMA could do the same thing, but then that would just be pro wrestling, And I know Dana White from UFC does not want to have anything to do with pro wrestling. He doesn't think he doesn't want to have anybody think anything bad about the UFC as far as characters and stuff. But a lot of their guys, I mean, the thing about the UFC and MMA in general is you can't tell the difference between one guy and the next. They're all the same guy, whereas at least Vince McMahon can fucking put together a guy, even if he's not that great, he could put a character on him, and you know who he is, and he sells toys and merchandise and stuff. He may not be very good, but you know what I mean? He's going to sell stuff.
One, Dana White fears pro wrestling. Yeah, that's all there is to it. Two, the best gimmicks that wrestlers get saddled with are the ones closer to them. Steve Austin as Stone Cold, he wasn't playing Stone Cold. He is a bad motherfucker, and he proved it in the ring. He had got a broken neck from Owen Hart, but he still came back and dominated and became their champion several times. You can't fake. Okay, Eric Young in TNA, perfect example. He was a goofball. He was a superhero. Now he's the leader of the World Elite. Once he gets serious about his game and focuses, he's going places there.
Right. Yeah, I understand and I agree with you. But then I could also say, on the other hand, you don't have to be that good to get over in WWE, because you could look at somebody like Steve Lombardi, who never won a match. I mean, he would win here and there. Every once in a while, he'd get lucky and win a match. And no one would remember Steve Lombardi. No one even knows who that is. But Vince put him in a gimmick called the Brooklyn Brawler, and everybody remembers it.
And he still didn't.
He could you could still sell merchandise off the Brooklyn Brawler. I mean,
sure.
you got guys over there that I mean, obviously, to me, in my opinion, most of the guys in pro wrestling could not hang athletically in the UFC, but they can hang good enough, in wrestling with these guys, that with the right character and the right amount of mic skills, they could be rich and famous. But you could have zero mic skills and be a badass like Fedor and get rich and famous in MMA. No problem. But if Fedor came into the WWE, he would beat everybody, but people would be bored to death by him.
Well, you know who's a guy in pro wrestling that would have done awesome in MMA, and he had no gimmick. And he probably would have done better in MMA. That's none other than the rugged one, Ronnie Garvin. That's the guy that
right,
built MMA, and there was no MMA at the time, no serious money at it. Ronnie Garvin would have cleaned up.
Yeah, I agree with you. Fuck, could you imagine if he would... I mean, I don't know how likely it would be, but could you imagine he could Garvin stomp somebody.
Oh, yeah.
And
like a curb stop.
The thing about pro wrestling is that the referees let it go a little bit more than they do in MMA. And Ronnie Garvin, I mean, if he Garvin stomped somebody in the octagon, once he got to the face, it will be over. I mean, it will probably be over before that.
Yeah,
if he
there would be because the person would be knocked out. There would be no tap.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, he would start, on a limb and then eventually get to the face. By the time he got to the face, it will be all over. I don't know. It's just fucking. Hey, let me just digress for 1 second, because shit's really off the fucking hook now, and I want to say that probably there is a good chance that tonight we will take some calls, but as anybody knows,
the thing about the rugged one. 21 years too late in his craft. If he would have been around now, he would be taking Lesnar's title off him.
No, he would have been in the same weight class. Ronnie Garvin, probably realistically, if he had to cut for in pro wrestling, you don't have to cut because they don't have any weight classes really. If he had in Mexico, they have weight classes, and in Europe, I think they have classes. But if he had to cut, he was a small guy. He wouldn't have been anywhere near. He would probably be fighting Anderson Silva or George St. Pierre, and that would be good. Hands of Stone, especially if he was fighting Anderson Silva, Hands of Stone versus Hands of Stone, that'd be great. And UFC is